Every life has a soundtrack. Join me as we invite guests to share their journey through music, one song at a time. 10 moments, 10 memories. I'm your host, Sean, and welcome to 10 Tracks.
Are you ready?
Welcome to 10 Tracks. My guest today is Steve Sxaks. Steve's a military veteran, punk rocker turned audio engineer, award-winning educator, and now a published author. He's the co-founder of Marsten House Recording, one of Philly's most respected recording studios, where he's produced for artists across every genre for over 16 years. He's also the creator of the Marsten House Cyphers, a celebrated platform for underground hip-hop talent. His debut novel is Invasion of the Punk Rockers Who Drink Blood. It's a fusion of horror, rebellion, and coming of age. Steve, welcome to 10 Tracks.
Thanks for having me.
Where are you in the world?
Well, originally from Philadelphia, most people already know that, but right now I'm currently in Tennessee, between Nashville and Chattanooga, in the middle of nowhere.
Okay. So is that a bit of a culture shock to go from, like, you were in kind of a downtown Philly or in the heart of Philadelphia, and now
Uh,
you're
yeah, well, I was in Northeast, but it is a huge culture shock. I mean, we don't have a stoplight in our whole town, so there, it's but I mean, even the good things were kind of shocking. Like, property taxes here are like $500 a year, where in Philly it's a few $1,000s on the low end. So it's just that stuff's different. The food is way different. We don't really have any restaurants on the mountain where we are. There's one, but in Philly you can get Chinese food at 4 o'clock in the morning. So if you don't have food by 9 o'clock here, you're done. You're cooking at home. So it's a lot of culture shock, but it's also really nice and just peaceful, which is
I
good.
know how that feels because the supermarkets close on Sunday at 12 o'clock where we are.
Uh,
There's no DoorDash or, Uber or food
oh
or
yeah, yeah.
anything to get. So if you don't go, restaurants are open, but they even close and then they close for lunch. So life in small towns is definitely you go at a different pace.
Oh, for sure. I mean, it's nice. It is nice, but it can at times be like, I really just want, a cheesesteak at midnight, and that's not happening.
Uh, what was it like though, growing up in Philadelphia?
Oh, I mean, I still say Philadelphia is the greatest city on earth. I love Philly. I have a lot of Philly pride, so I still represent Philly very hard to the fullest because it's a cultural melting pot. And like I said, food, like you can walk a block and get any kind of food you've ever desired. If you want Thai food, Chinese, Vietnamese, Indian, Afghani, halal, uh, pretty much anything you could think of, you can get in Philly. And there's just all types of people. I think it's a great place to grow up. If diversity is important to you, I'd had friends, everybody like just we were all just growing up together. So and again, like there's just so much cultural stuff, like the pride of your sports teams.
Hmm.
Die-hard Eagles fan. I'm a 4 for 4 guy. So I love Philly sports, and it's just I've gone on tour and in the military all over the world, and I've never met other than like footballers from Europe. That's what I equate being like a Philadelphia sports fan to, because there's definitely
Yeah.
no American cities that have the same level of just heinous heinous sports fans.
You take tailgating to a new level, huh?
Oh, to an absolute new level. I mean, we really do have a lot of pride, and even though we get a reputation, you hear it on the media, we threw snowballs at Santa or whatever, like that. We get that reputation, but then when in times of crisis, we come together like no one I've ever seen. So it's just been, I do value that experience a lot. We're loud. I like that. I'm a loud talker myself, so it gets into your system, but. I don't know. I don't think there's anywhere else kind of like it to grow up. And maybe that's why we chose to raise our kids somewhere else, just because that doesn't always necessarily mean that's the best. You know, it's not
Yeah.
necessarily the safest. And there could be times where I know I got in with the wrong crowd a few times here and there as a kid. So, you know, and the more people there are, the more just outlandish things kept popping up. So, while I loved it, I am really thankful that we're raising our kids in the middle of nowhere. Where their closest neighbors are cows and horses.
So I did, obviously growing up in the South in New Orleans, I was a Saints fan, and and
Oh
still,
yeah.
well, that forever. The fact that they won one Super Bowl, I can die a happy man. I don't need, they don't have to win again. Just once, because when people used to go wearing bags over their head to the Saints games, they were called the Aints. But my basketball was never really a thing when I was younger. We didn't really have a basketball. We did have a team, and then they left, and so we were pretty much without. But when I was a young kid, my team was Philadelphia, Dr. J.
Oh yeah.
So
The
he was like my
Sixers.
hero. And so I was like, it was less of a turf thing, like you have to, your town, because baseball and basketball wasn't really a thing in New Orleans back then. So you really only had the Saints or college football, LSU
Right.
or stuff. To really, that was where you would never, those were your colors. But when it came to baseball or basketball or something, it's all fair game if you want. A lot of New Orleans fans were Braves fans for baseball, um,
That makes sense because it's
or
closer.
Houston. You had what were they? Orioles,
Houston
Astros, Astros.
Astros. Yep.
Yeah,
I'm not a fan. They beat us in that World Series. So I spent a lot of time in Houston too. And Houston still like I have a lot of love for Houston, but they don't go near as crazy with the sports stuff as we do in Philly. Like I'm
right.
even when the Astros were in the series, 2 days later they weren't talking about it anymore. The Phillies win the world. I was at the World Series we won. I was at the World Series we lost too. And people went insane. It was my first time seeing, I remember seeing cops outside of the cop cars flipping their own patrol vehicles. Like that's the kind of stuff that was going on. And then, I've been to both Eagles Super Bowl. Right after the Super Bowl goes off, we always go home for it, and there's just thousands and thousands of people walking to Broad Street, going to City Hall, going crazy, and it's just such a good time. The media makes it look a lot crazier than it is, but it's so fun. And I just remember Houston just like having like the Astros won. We got off early. I was teaching at a school called Workshop Houston. We got off a little early for the parade, and after that, that was it. It was just like a nice little, which is cool, but it's a different beast
Yeah, but I think it's also like somewhere like Chicago, LA, maybe New York is a little bit special because it's more condensed.
for
But I
sure.
think there's so much going on that there's so a part of the whole city that's not consumed with the sport and what's
Right.
doing. But tell me a little bit about you from an early age. You kind of got into punk. That was your first kind of into music,
Oh yeah, yeah. So I mean, I really related with punk. I had a couple friends whose older brothers and sisters were into it. My best friend, Chad, his sister, she's a little older than us, and she'd always have like Misfits t-shirts and things like that. And then my friend Jordan, his brother was older than us, and he'd have like the Germs, stuff like that. So
yeah.
um, just seeing these shirts and kind of like getting a little bit they were getting into it and we'd kind of share CDs with each other and see what we liked. It just really stuck to me. And I've always been very like political and I've always been really like concerned with people getting wronged. I don't know why, but when I started listening to punk rock, it just kind of clicked with me that this is where I belonged. And me and my young uh 10 to 12-year-old friends would try to start bands, and we started a horrible band called 3 p.m. for three punk musicians. And none of us knew how to play our instruments, and we tried recording on like a little tape deck and it was terrible, but that was like the early foundations of what led into something a lot better. But yeah, the music just really stuck with me. Um, it was like the first time I never really could get into like the AC/DCs and my dad liked a lot of that, but he did like Social Distortion, which I didn't give too much of a chance early because it was like, I just thought he liked just kind of classic rock, which just didn't, it felt a little superficial to me. And then my mom also, she was into like the Rolling Stones and stuff like that, but she did like the Clash. So I took like the Clash and the Social D from my dad and then branched off into all this other stuff. But which also led me to hip hop too. It's just that once I found hip hop, it felt very, when I found that a lot of the punk rock lyrics and the hip hop lyrics were similar, it
Yeah.
connected with me, which, that's a different story. But yeah, it really resonated with me. And I felt like going to these punk rock shows with all these other kids, it just felt like this sense of community. It was like a second family, so that was really important to me growing up.
I mean, I can sort of see that. I think I'm a little bit older than you, but and I was kind of a little bit at the tail end of the early punk. So I missed out on like Minor Threat and some of these, but I did get to see Black Flag and then
Nice.
Rollins band in early stage at dives. I mean, in New Orleans, these were
Oh
dives.
yeah.
I don't know what else to describe it. One of the places actually they played, my band played there, but it was a bar, but it had a stage, but it was not something like where you would, maybe there were 40 or 50 people. I think I said on another podcast, we all used the same fake ID. I was 15 to get in when Black Flag were playing on this. And it was right, I think they were still around for another year or so, and then they broke up or something. But it was just, and you were literally like right next to you with Rollins and stuff. But I remember like later on when with hip hop getting a lot more bigger, early hip hop like Beastie Boys and some of those, like I knew LL Cool J, maybe Run DMC, but I remember seeing some interview with Public Enemy, and they had on Minor Threat T-shirts,
Hmm.
and I was just like, okay, this is pretty cool. How the fact that they even and I'm sure Rick Rubin was behind that to some extent, but just it was an interesting seeing how, and then they worked with like Anthrax and heavier bands, and their sound was obviously a lot
Oh yeah.
more heavier than other hip hop. But that to me just showed that, like you said, there is this underground where artists who are talking, not directly protest, but a lot of like punk and some of the early hip hop were, they would talk about what's going on in the world, and they were very much vocal around situations. So they kind of picked up the baton from, say, some of the early folk or rock that tried to be protest artists, maybe in the '60s.
For sure. I mean, like, there's a lot of hip hop groups like Dead Prez. Dead
Mm-hmm.
Prez is
Yeah,
very, political, and they talk about like veganism and stuff that is heavy topics in punk rock. And like you're saying, Public Enemy, even to this day, they have that super group, which is like Public Enemy, Cypress Hill, and Rage Against the Machines. They're called Prophets of Rage. It's very
yeah,
heavy. And, a lot of those hip hop groups did that Judgment Night album where it's like all the hip hop with, I know they had like Sonic Youth was on there, and uh it's a great album. They just paired up Ice-T, and I mean, speaking of Ice-T, Body Count,
body count for sure.
and there's so many different crossovers, and a lot of those early rappers, like you said, were wearing Minor Threat t-shirts. Bad Brains was big in the hip hop community. I still see a lot of rappers wearing like Bad Brains gear and a lot of that early DC punk rock stuff, in New
Yeah,
York. So and I think the crossover now is even bigger because some of the really bigger hip hop artists like Tyler the Creator, he signed several punk rock bands to his label. He was a punk rock kid. Like all those kids were skaters, and hip hop
Pharrell as
and
well.
Pharrell for sure. Hip hop and punk rock, you know, are both really big in the skateboard community.
Yeah,
So a lot of those kids, where thankfully for the internet, kids are getting exposed to so much stuff that I think wasn't as easily accessible when we were younger. And now these kids are growing up and they're listening to, hardcore. They're listening to Comeback Kid or whatever sounds good to skate, or whoever's got the Bluetooth stereo and could just throw on a playlist, and it's hip hop, it's punk rock, it's hardcore, it's whatever sounds good. So it's just people are so more interconnected now, which I think is awesome.
yeah.
I think it's inspiring great music. Like I know Tyler the Creator was on tour with this band called Trash Talk, which Trash Talk I've seen 100 times. They were just like a really fast, short song, hardcore band, and I think that's insane. Like knowing that there's kids going to see a rap show and this band is opening for them, playing 30-second songs. It's really cool. So it's just, or there's it's we're so connected through music, and I think that once people hear stuff and see how similar it is, they've become so much more open to it. It's not like it used to be. I mean, it used to be you were a weirdo if you liked punk rock when I was growing up.
Yeah, for
You know?
sure. I think hip hop and punk alternative are cousins.
Yeah.
There isn't such a divide anymore.
Mm.
I think you get crossover with country, you get crossover with other genres as well. But I mean, I also loved in hip hop with jazz when they were
Hmm.
using a lot of samples. I think it was Guru who from in Gangstar.
Oh yeah.
They were taking a lot of the jazz stuff, Tribe Called Quest, and to me that was also inspiring because it's taking other types of styles and genres and mixing it in and creating something even different compared to the early stuff. So I think it keeps evolving, and punk has evolved to some extent as well. I think you
Oh
still
yeah.
you have to stick to the roots of it, but I think that there's still even songs that aren't necessarily 3 minutes or two minutes of speed. They still have a punk root behind what they're saying.
Oh, for sure. I mean, it's like, punk is now so much more accepted mainstream. And I'm not even just talking like a mainstream punk band in the 90s was like Green Day. That's as punk rock as it was getting on the radio, but or a Blink 182 or something like that. But now, you know, bands that have been around like classic punk rock stuff, like everybody just knows. Like you could buy a Misfits t-shirt at Walmart or Target, or you could buy a Ramones t-shirt at Target. Like it's crazy. So this kind of stuff is just really, it has evolved the genre too. I think the and as somebody even from the recording industry, even when we first started, like there was no good at-home recording equipment. It was all pretty much trash. And just in the 16 years that we've been open, I can record a project at my house that sounds just as good as I can at the studio. And I think that that's opened a barrier for a lot of people from all genres, but specifically like punk rock, where, you can get a great guitar sound from digital emulators. So you can get an Orange sound or a Mesa Boogie sound, and you can record it yourself and not really have to worry about going and paying $100 an hour at a studio. And it's just opened the barrier for so many incredible musicians to where the genre has truly just taken off. Like kids who should be
Mhm.
playing in technical death metal, but they love punk, and they're just adding these crazy guitar sweeps to a genre that a lot of people think of just power chords. So
Yeah,
it has evolved because the musicianship has evolved so much and the accessibility has evolved so much that it's just, yeah, it is kind of way different listening to a band that starts today versus a band that started in like 1978. So it's cool, but I mean, it's still, I still think that paying the homage to like the early pioneers, the Iggy Pops, the Stooges, the Velvet Undergrounds, all those foundational bands, and then going into the Ramones and the Clash and the Misfits and all that, and just the Minor Threats and the DC era, and just like having the knowledge of where it came from will kind of make you better today. But again, if you hear a band name, you can just put it in your phone and pull up their entire discography.
yeah.
It's crazy where we are.
And we don't get too over political on the show, but listen to some bands like Dead Kennedys and stuff they were talking about in their early records. It's kind of coming around full circle now today, and what's going on in maybe in the States, but other parts of the world. I mean, a lot of the same stuff they were talking about. You could just tweak it here and there,
Right.
for certain songs, but it's a lot of that still uh, full circle kind of thing.
More relevant than it's ever been, honestly. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
You could pick out, and not to toot my own horn, but I feel that way about some of my old songs. Where in the band I was in, Fruit Punch, like I could take lyrics from that, and it's just I could have wrote those songs today. So
yeah.
punk rock is eternal, and hip hop's like that too. I mean, not I think a lot of people feel a lot of the early hip hop was more just like, yo, the hip to the hop to the hip, and that was like the surface level stuff, but there was a lot of great, foundational hip hop stuff that was talking about things that are, and we've already kind of went over a little bit of that with Public Enemy, Chuck D, master lyricist, the Rakims, that whole the Juice Crew. Like there's so much stuff that you know you could pluck out from hip hop, from punk rock, from even early country and folk. Your Woody Guthrie's, This Machine Kills Fascists, like that being on his guitar at that time is insane. To where some of those songs that he did, and Woody Guthrie had some silly songs too, if you're familiar, but um, a lot of that is prominent now. A lot of Bob Dylan is prominent now. Like folk, like all these
Yeah.
things, they're just music is eternal. It's never outdated. It's just besides some I hate being hard on pop music because I have made money in pop, but it's like I think pop is a surface level a lot of times kind of genre. Not always. I think there's incredible songwriters in pop music too, but sometimes it can be surface level. At least, there's the hits of those 5 minute hits where it's just like a hit for a week and you never think of it again. That's different than a lot of just timeless stuff that's really got that wasn't churned through a machine. So yeah, here we are.
Let's dive into your tracks.
Okay.
This is track one. Um, this is Manchester Orchestra. I can feel a hot one.
Yes. I don't know if you ever heard Manchester Orchestra. Um, they
Only
are
recently when you on your list.
they are an incredible band. They're kind of a concept band, I would say, where every album is a completely different band. But I've been into them forever, and they just as a whole band, their their sound, the way that they changed with everything was very inspiring to me. Because I kind of took that and I every project I put out has a little bit different flavor. I might have it might be a hip hop album, but the whole album is all live instruments. It might be a punk rock album, but it has some like digital breakdown beats and some industrial influences and whatever. I'll add whatever I want into there. And Manchester Orchestra really like opened up a lot of that like with not will but like the freedom to just know that you could do whatever you want.
Yeah.
um Now with that specific song, I can't put that song on without crying every time. I know what's coming. And the way that the lyrics are just written, he's describing this car crash. um
This is
and
like he wrote it about a friend, a close friend that died. Like
right,
it's like some truth in that.
there's truth into it. And I've had, he's talking about the pregnancy, getting lost in the accident and everything. And it's like that, it was very relatable to me. Um, like I said, I prayed to what I thought were angels, turned out to be ambulances. Like that, it's just so cleverly written.
Hmm.
And that's a big thing for me with songs. Like I love lyrics that make you have to like peel back all the layers on it. And just like that, that's just such a clever lyric right there. But
Hmm.
yeah, I can't put it on to this day without like having a tear come out of my face. And for me, like that, the most inspirational music is sad songs. I actually cannot write a song without being like kind of down for some reason. I know it sounds crazy. I don't know if I'm alone in this as an artist, but if I'm like all up in like a great mental state, I cannot write music. It comes out like crap. But when I'm just miserable for some reason, I'll put out some of the greatest, some of the greatest stuff that I've ever heard. But that song just like it has hit me. I remember the first time I ever heard it. Um, I was driving in Montana. I was doing this thing called the Veteran Fire Corps, and I just started bawling. I was just by myself. And so the Veteran Fire Corps is a group of veterans that go out and they do one season as a firefighter. It's kind of like a recruitment tool for people to get you to come do wildland firefighting. And
Hmm.
every you go 10 days on, so you're working for 10 days, and then you get 2 or 3 days off. And on those 3 days off, we would kind of just go. They didn't like give you housing or anything, so you had to kind of figure out what you were doing. And everybody kind of just did their own thing. And I was driving around Montana and just I found this bookstore called I want to say it was Books a Million or something like that. And they had Manchester Orchestra's full discography on sale for like 99 cents a CD. So I just bought
Oh wow.
yeah, I bought every album that they had. And I don't know what it was, but that song just completely just like broke me in the best way. Um,
Yeah.
but I'll always remember just kind of driving around listening to all these CDs, and then that one came on. And then I noticed it's a recurring theme in several of their songs. Like they have an album called Simple Math, which is when I teach people recording, I think it's one of the most masterfully mixed and recorded projects ever. So I use that as a big example just because the way that the engineer did it is just it's incredible. I mean, it's like everything's perfectly balanced. I think it's a great tool for teaching. But
Hmm.
they have the song called Simple Math on that project where it talks about the same exact topic. The whole video it takes place in a car crash, like they're crashing in slow motion while the video is going on, and it's a recurring theme with them. But I also really take an inspiration from that, like touching back on earlier topics. So yeah, I mean I love that song. I love that band. I think they're an amazing band. I can't really speak highly of them enough, I feel like.
How did you get into producing and engineering and kind of like doing the mixing for?
Well, I remember the first time I said I was going to start a recording studio, I was 12. Um,
Okay.
and I have this weird thing where if I say I'm going to do something, I have to do it. No matter how long it takes me to do it, I'm going to do it. It'll drive me insane. So touring, I was constantly on the road. I dropped out of school to go on tour, and we'd be on the road 6 months at a time, sometimes longer. And the money was great and everything, but I just knew at the time, this is circa 2007. Um, Being a mainstream punk rock musician in 2007 that's able to provide for a family and all that stuff was in again at the time you had the Green Days, you still had your pop punk bands like Blink-182 or the really big ones like the Good Charlottes and the MXPXs and all those kind of bands. But that wasn't us. We were a very hardcore political band. And that wasn't something that a lot of people were listening to outside of the genre. And I just thought we'd be a rare case to kind of have this be sustainable. So I
Mhm.
started putting aside some of our tour money we were coming up with and saving up to do this studio. And then eventually 2008, we took out a bunch of loans and me and one of my bandmates, Ethan Mintz, we took out some loans and just started construction on the first location. We opened in 2009, and yeah, that was that. It was just I didn't want to work for anybody else. I'm not very good at working for other people, which I have several stories about throughout this thing, I'm sure. But I wanted to make sure I still had a career in music without necessarily just having to constantly be on the hustle and bustle of being on the road.
So where is the recording studio now?
It's in Philly. Our first location, we did it in a garage in my backyard. We built a whole building for it. And then we were there for a couple of years, and then we moved to North Philly, kind of right outside of Temple campus, and we've been there for over a decade. So, yeah, about 16, or we've been open 16 years, so we've been there probably 11 years. We're at the first one for 5.
Okay, wow. So do you do some commuting when you're like producing or in the studio?
Yeah, I mean, I still go up there, try to get up there monthly. I'll take a solo trip up there. I was just up there last month, I want to say, working on my audiobook. But I also am thankful that I have a good team of engineers and interns and Ethan still lives there too. So it's a lot of the stuff that I have to do, I can do from home. I'm in my little home studio. I got a nice little vocal booth over here. I got a bunch of monitors and, a lot of studio equipment in this room. So I'm able to do a lot of production from here. And I can
Mm.
do a lot of remote mixing from here as well. But anything big, if there's clients that just like really have to record with me, I have no problem going home and doing it.
Yeah. Um, we get to track two. This is Alkaline Trio.
Okay.
Radio?
Oh man, are you familiar with Alkaline Trio?
No.
Okay, so Alkaline Trio, they've been around since the early 90s. Uh, they were like one of the more like founding like pop punk kind of bands in that time. But they're still around and still putting out great stuff. Uh, radio specifically, I remember going through a breakup and I would put this album on and I couldn't go to sleep without listening to it every night. I had a 5 disc changer. It had two Alkaline Trio albums in there, it had two Comeback Kid albums in there, and they would rotate. But radio um, is another really cleverly written song, or it's like, but it's angsty. It's about this guy's disdain for this person he was with, and it's just like it starts off, it's like shaking like a dog shitting razor blades,
Yeah, I
wake it.
remember that line.
Yeah, yeah, it's like it's and then the whole thing is I want you to take my radio to bathe with you, plugged in and ready to fall. So it is a little homicidal, but they're
Yeah.
kind of like the punk rock misfits. The pop punk misfits is how I would describe like an Alkaline Trio. But their lyrics are so clever, and I remember going through this breakup as a teenager. What do I know about love? But for me, this song is just like that's how I really felt. It just really encapsulated how I felt at the time. And Matt Skiba, just as a lyricist, was a huge, huge inspiration on how I write lyrics. And probably because I dumped that stuff into my subconscious brain while I slept for years, it felt like. But um, yeah, I just felt like he really understood what I was going through as this young kid going through a breakup. Uh, no one could have told me that life was going to be okay again. So,
Yeah.
relating to this, I don't even want you to be here anymore because you broke my heart, you know, teenage
I think
angst thing.
I think the for my teenage kind of sad songs, or especially around thinking breakups, I had the Descendants. That was some of
Oh,
the, where they would do these little pop punk songs about the girl breaking up with him or something like that, and that was like, oh my God, this is me. So
I love the Descendants. Yeah, that's a whole different animal right there.
you obviously you were in the army. Tell me a little bit about when this was already you like pre like school, or how old you were, like 19 or 18 when you joined?
So the studio was already open when I went in. I was 20.
20.
Um, and it was not something I ever thought I'd do in my life. It wasn't on my list of things to do. And if you listen to any of my lyrics from Fruit Punch, you'd be like shocked. But my best friend, Chad, that I've known since I was 5 years old, he came to the studio one day and he said, I'm joining the Marines. And I just said, me too, let's go. And we went to the recruiter, but I have very heavily tattooed. So the Marine recruiter was like, "No, you can get in, but not you, not with all those tattoos." So we went to the Air Force, and they said the same thing. And we went to the Coast Guard, and they've just never were open. We went every day to the Coast Guard recruiter for a week in Franklin Mills Mall, and they just never opened the whole time we were going. And then we went to the Army, and they're like, "Come on, we can waiver all those." So again, it was not something I thought I'd ever do. And my dad wasn't very happy with me doing it because he's like, "You're gonna mess up your music career. You got all the music going on, And I was as a solo hip hop artist, my that was really taking off. I was doing some bigger shows, and I was kind of novelty at the time because I'm like this one of the few like white kid rappers out here in Philly, and but because of that, I was getting a lot of looks and a lot of coverage. So he was really mad at me for doing it, but I didn't want my friend to do it without me. And getting there, a lot of my um, beliefs that I had were, every kid's going to be a meathead kind of jock type like guy, and it just wasn't really like that. I met a lot of kids who were just trying to get their citizenship or trying to get, you know. Uh, school paid for or health care or just provide for their family, and people from all walks of life all over the world that were coming through doing different programs to get in. And it was a great experience. And while I still really have a lot of the same political beliefs I had, it changed my opinion on just like the soldiers from an individual level. I mean, I met a lot of punk
Hmm.
rockers, I met a lot of hip hoppers, I made music with tons of people in the military in the 12 years I was doing it. And it's like, it was a really great experience.
So you were in the army for 12 years.
I did six and then six more in the guard.
Okay. Did you ever go to any conflict zones?
No. I did not see any combat, thankfully.
Yeah, obviously. Interesting. But I imagine that there was some discipline that was kind of.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, it instilled a lot of maybe I didn't always have. I'm scatterbrained. I'm sure you could tell talking to me. I'm all over the place when I'm thinking about things. So the military definitely helped me like hone in on things and do a better job at getting things done. I don't know if I would ever finish this book without going through that. And again, just like help, I think it helped me process like traumatic things better too. Because while I didn't see conflict. I saw a ton of disasters, floods. I've seen, domestic terrorism incidents. I've seen different things that we've been, assigned to do. Um, so learning how to deal with those things was great. And I think it's helped me deal with just a lot in real life. Even though, I of course, I think anybody who does music is a little bit crazy, so it can only help so much. But
And crazy's good. That's the only thing I'm going to say. If you're not a little crazy in everything you do in life, then what's the point of living? Because then you might as well just be a robot.
right, I think a lot of people are, I call them NPCs, the non-playable characters. So I think at least like 60% of people are NPCs, but not everybody can be the main character.
We come to track three.
Okay.
This is Comeback Kid, Wake of the Dead.
Wake the Dead. Have you ever heard that band before? Comeback Kid? Just
You're
uh
getting me every time, just so you know.
Comeback Kid is, they were like one of my first like, and not like Minor Threat. I had been into like Minor Threat, Gorilla Biscuits. I had been into like Chain of Strength. I was like a straight edge kid for a long time. I was into a lot of that stuff, like the earlier hardcore stuff. But Comeback Kid was like the first quote unquote at the time. I mean, this is so long ago, modern hardcore band I really got into. And that, made me kind of break out from having to wear like the studded patched up jackets and the mohawk, and just seeing like these guys are playing this like fast hard music with, and they're just wearing shorts and a band t-shirt. Like, you don't
Hmm.
have to wear the uniform. And it really made me think about this like punk rock uniform. It's like, hey, we're not conforming, but you don't have your flair on, you're not punk rock enough. um
Yeah.
and that really just spoke to me. Like Comeback Kid, then that song specifically, that was like the first, that might have been one of the first songs I heard from them. And it just like, I just was so blown away. Like just, and I really could relate to, I'm sure every kid can, that like the song is about betrayal, and it's about, losing friends and growing apart and how it can never be the same again. And I don't think there's a human on earth that can't relate to that in some extent. But also being, a young boy in Philadelphia, and just having all this like pent up aggression and anger. And, my parents were getting divorced, and I was getting in trouble. I'm going to an alternative school, and uh, that I hear this music, and I'm just like, wow, this is. I felt betrayed from everybody. Like I think every adult I felt betrayed
Yeah.
by, and every kid, we're leaving elementary school and going into junior high, and I'm feeling that, separation from these kids that I grew up with, to now we're at this bigger thing. And it's that's why that song just sat with me so much. It's just this, I don't think that there's a more relatable topic. And then that exposed me to so many other bands, Trapped Under Ice, and um Cruel Hand, and there's I could just go on and on about different hardcore bands, but it was so much different than like the founding fathers of hardcore, like your Black Flags and your Minor Threats and your Gorilla Biscuits and your Youth of Today's and all those. It was so different because it wasn't necessarily just solely based on politics or like current events. It was more personal, and that's where I really loved my love for hardcore came from, or especially the modern hardcore, was it having this personal touch to it. And I found it to be very relatable on it didn't really matter if you were, where punk rock and especially like the more underground stuff that I was into was like a crust, they would call it. Bands like Fleas and Lice and Subhumans and these very like underground punk rock bands, if older ones like Crass, yeah,
Yeah.
so stuff like that. That was really the punk rock like I loved the most. But you had to be a specific political ideology to find any kind of enjoyment in that music.
Yeah.
Where Comeback Kid, you just had to be a human to like it. So that song, it caught me, and just it really was very formative and just changed, I think, the trajectory of where I went as just a human.
Yeah. I think that's also interesting because I gravitated to bands. My style is similar to what you're saying. I remember once I saw like if a beginning of punk, you have to have these kind of boots, you have to have this jacket,
Mhm.
studs. I never had a mohawk or anything, but then I saw the Ramones, and it's just like a white T-shirt and some kind of old
Right.
jeans and a pair of Converse or something, And I'm like, okay, that's kind of same with Minor Threat. And it was like I'm more into the music and what they're saying and the well, this, what they're talking about and the what the music makes you. I mean, I don't know if you ever saw this. It was a great where the Germs were in it. It was the decline of Western civilization.
Oh, yeah, classic.
Yeah. And so just, seeing Rude Boy by The Clash, when they
Yep.
were in the different, how their style, but there was always the roots of what's behind them. And that's what I loved so much. And that's what inspired me with a lot of music and all these bands. Okay. So Crass was influenced by Iggy Pop, maybe, or, even further to Northern Soul music, which is probably around the Motown stuff and beyond. So you get into some of these different subgenres of things, and I think that's so cool, and that's what's inspiring. Even like some of the bands you're talking about, their influences and how they're creating, but they're using that same energy, and that's the most important thing. And I liked where it wasn't all just we're a political band, everything has to be political song, because then I
Right.
found that they were a little bit one dimensional. I mean,
I agree.
Dead Kennedys were kind of like that, but I feel like they did it in such a way. But when you could mix your politics, but mix with emotion, mix with normal situations, I felt like they had a little bit more all around uh, kind of artist.
No, I agree, and with the Dead Kennedys, while they were like that, Jello, not everybody's Jello Biafra. He's
No.
a different like that. Jello's a kind of an entertainer at heart, so it can carry the band in a little bit different way. Because I've seen them, now they tour without him.
Yeah.
They're and DH Peligro, he passed away recently, but they're still performing. And I saw them. There's a music festival in Tennessee. It's amazing. If you ever get the chance to go, I would highly recommend it. It's called Muddy Roots. It's a punk
Muddy
rock.
Roots.
Yeah, it's one of the best music festivals I've ever been to, and I've seen they had Fishbone one year. It was like Fishbone, Electric Wizard. It was just like crazy. They had Jizza from the Wu-Tang performing with a bluegrass band, which was a mind-blowing kind of thing to watch. Avail, Tim Barry from Avail did an acoustic set, and Avail did a reunion show. Avail is one of my favorite Virginia bands ever. Like just great punk band. So it's just like this huge, just and I found a lot of like I'm not sure if you're familiar with like folk punk. There's a ton of folk punk stuff there too, like Amigo the Devil, and it's just such an amazing festival. But Dead Kennedys were there on that tour without Jello, and
Hmm.
it doesn't carry the band as much without Jello. So
No.
it's just Black Flag's doing it too. There's like three different Black Flag iterations touring. There's Flag, then there's Black Flag. I think there's two bands called Black Flag, and then there's Flag. Um, yeah, so it's interesting seeing that where it just doesn't really. I know
Is like one of them is Keith Morris from the
one of
Circle
them is
Jerks?
Keith, yeah, and
Yeah.
that one's better because I've seen both. I've actually seen both play. Um, and Keith's version's pretty good. But Keith is still, besides the Circle Jerk still tour and Off, his newer band Off is awesome.
Was
Um,
off was that part of the Descendants as well?
I think so. I'm not sure who's all in the band.
Yeah.
I've seen them. They actually did Muddy Roots too. And then I saw
Okay.
them another time. They played at another, I think it was like Riot Fest in Chicago. They performed at
Yeah.
one year. That was the year it was the Misfits' first show back with Danzig, and it was Motion City Soundtrack's last show. So I had to go for both of those. And then Off, that was the first time I saw Off, and they're really good live. Keith notorious 20-minute talking breaks per song. That's still true. But he still is he's still killing it.
Yeah, I unfortunately didn't get to see the Dead Kennedys when they played in New Orleans. It was an all-age show, but it was just one of the days I couldn't get there or get a ride or something, because I was probably like 14 or when they
Right, right.
played. And I saw the Descendants. I didn't see the Circle Jerks. I think they were playing with another kind of event. They have a lot of shows that would come through New Orleans, so I was lucky in that respect. But yeah, it's just it's so much of the scene I think that was interesting the way it started and how bands got, because it did trigger a lot of people to want to start bands in similar situation to how you started. You know, me and my friends did that as well. Kind of start out with just barely. We had a drum, just snare drum, and a bass that was never tuned right, or to start, kind
Right.
of thing.
Yeah, I
But
mean,
we
who
were
knew
just
what
doing
tuning was?
it. We get to track 4. This is Social Distortion,
Oh yeah.
1945. Now, I do know this one, just disclaimer.
Social D gets such an interesting like reputation with like punk rockers because some people just really can't stand them and other people love them. I'm a lover of Social D, and I know, you know, a lot of people don't like Mike because they feel like his lyrics aren't like punk rock enough. But 1945 was the first Social D song I ever heard, and it blew me away, and that was actually one of their more political songs, of course.
Yeah.
But just like how it cuts in, atom bomb, TNT, like what a, it's very melodic, but it was just incredible, and I immediately I bought that record, the 1945 7-inch. I was working at a record store in Philadelphia called Long in the Tooth. They're still
Hmm.
open. Great record store for anybody who loves punk rock records. They really pride themselves on getting some good stuff. But I remember grabbing that record and just like popping that thing in, just being blown away. And then, of course, there was Another State of Mind documentary. Have you ever seen Another State of Mind?
I don't think so,
If
no.
you haven't, you gotta get that one. It's so good. Social D. It's about their touring. And it was when they were doing 1945. That was like their first, like
Hmm.
their first tour, and they had they're touring with Youth Brigade. And who else was the other band on that? I mean, they had they Minor Threats in the documentary. You got Henry Rollins in the documentary when he's talking about some of his early stuff, and it's just like before Black Flag, Henry Rollins.
Yeah, yeah. He was in Discord
Yeah,
Records, and I think it was SOA or something.
SOA. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it goes into a lot of that early DC stuff, and just like watching Mike. on tour, and a couple band members left the tour because Mike Ness gets like super strung out on heroin and stuff. Like it's just like a great documentary. But for me, like 1945, just hearing that, and it was, I think, because Social D was so close in a lot of ways, it was that like punk and roll. I remember people used to describe it as, to like some of the stuff like my dad listened to, and being able to bond over a band with my dad was really cool because my dad was like a, like I said, AC/DC. He loves Zeppelin. He liked, you know, Foghat and uh, all that kind of stuff. And it never really sat with me, but he loves Social D, and we got to bond over it so much. And we got to go. Me and my dad have seen Social D together probably 5 times, and that's really super cool. And that's really, yeah, that song just was like a huge bonding point with my dad. And I think him realizing not everything I listened to was a bunch of crap. I remember like I was into that band Anti-Flag heavy when I was like 12 years old. And I remember him reading some lyrics from that, and he was just like, "This is what you're into." It was like such a disappointment for him because it was so just extreme, I guess. But other bands we really like got into together too was like Electric Frankenstein. Um, Another awesome like punk rock, but just more on the rock and roll edge of it.
Yeah.
So a lot of those bands my dad was super into, and 1945, Mommy's Little Monster, like all that early Social D stuff just like really connected me and my dad in a different kind of way than, obviously, he's my dad. Like I love him, but we bonded so much more over that music, and he kind of like understood. He's like, okay, like this isn't all just crap. It's like,
Yeah.
there's some good stuff here too.
But I kind of, not that I classify them in the same category, but I kind of link them to bands like The Replacements and Bad Religion, to
Hmm.
some way that they were punk, but they weren't trying to be just that. They actually wanted to like focus on songs, and I think they had probably rock in their roots.
Right, right,
So they still had that attitude, and maybe you can't change that. It's the same with different types of genres where you might have this attitude, but you still are challenging yourself to make a more melodic song, or more this song, or more that
right.
song. I mean, Social Distortion recently opened up on the West Coast for Morrissey, if you know who Morrissey is.
Oh yeah, of course, the Smiths. I'm very
Yeah.
familiar.
So I saw that on some on Instagram, and I was like, wow, that's an interesting combination. But I think they just did some dates on the West Coast with him.
I think a lot of like, because punk rockers especially have kind of turned their back on Morrissey because he's really kind of come out as like a right wing kind of guy, and I think that that's where Social D kind of, people think that of like Mike Ness as well. His solo music is very country. I like both of his solo records. I think they're both good, but a lot of people don't care for it. Actually, it's funny you mentioned them with Bad Religion because Greg, his solo albums are very country as well. Um,
Hmm.
so. Yeah, I think that's where Social D kind of gets lumped in with like a Morrissey and like the right wing crowd. I think it is more palatable to maybe people who listen to that kind of stuff. But um, I don't. I'll always love Social D. I don't, as long as he doesn't come out like howling Hitler or something. I'll be
Yeah.
big with like this. But yeah, Morrissey. I've seen Morrissey on his solo tours. He did that same Riot Fest I went to where with Danzig, Misfits. And I remember the funny thing from that was all the food vendors in his rider were not allowed to sell meat during his performance. I
Yeah,
remember
I
people
know.
being so mad about it.
Yeah, I've seen the Smiths when before in 1986, and I've seen Morrissey a few times, and he's definitely the venues when he does if it was a normal venue, it all has to be vegetarian or vegan and stuff, and
Right.
he's a special I think, but still has some punk in his roots too
Oh
as
yeah, for sure.
well.
I mean, the Smiths, I love those Smiths records. Like they're great. And I think one of my favorite all-time covers is Quicksand doing How Soon Is Now. So, you know,
Yeah.
great song.
I think I had or I've heard there was a whole album of From the Queen is Dead from the Smiths done by more metal band like speed metal like
Yeah, I've heard stuff
Slayer.
like that.
Like if you take Slayer bands like Slayer, and they did this like the whole album and just did a version of it, and it's quite. I mean, it's like power. It just like
Right.
took it to a
I've heard
different
a few
level.
things like that, like uh, the Smiths go punk or the Smiths go metal, and yeah, I've heard stuff like that. Yeah, it's pretty good. I kind of like stuff like that.
Yeah. We get to track 5.
Alrighty.
This
I
is
forget what
Sean
I put these
Price,
in, what order. Oh, Sean Price. This is a great one.
straight music.
Okay, so Sean Price. My very first hip hop show I ever went to was Sean Price on the Jesus Price tour, and it was opening for Jedi Mind Tricks, and the very like the other opener was Reef the Lost Cause. Um, this was I have another song on here actually that'll kind of lead more into that story, but when I got really into punk rock, this was I just started consuming it. Yeah, I mean not punk rock, hip hop. I started
Yeah.
consuming it as much as I could, and I'm just looking for shows, and I see this show, Sean Price, Jedi Mind Tricks, Reef the Lost Cause at the Trocadero. I'd been to the Trocadero at many punk shows, and I'm just like, all right, I'm gonna go there. Me and my girlfriend at the time, we're 15, and we go there, and completely blown away. First off, Sean Price, one of the greatest, like just one of the greatest entertainers, one of the greatest rappers of all time. I'm a huge Sean Price fan. He passed away in 2015, unfortunately, but uh, such a cool dude. And as I mean, I'll never forget like being a 15-year-old kid, not being super familiar with hip hop, um, talking of the artist at the show. That
Hmm.
really drew me in. Reef the Lost Cause. I'm pretty friendly with him now. I've recorded him several times. I've given him rides to and from shows. I've been to his store. Like I've met his kids. Like I've just like yeah, it's crazy going from being a 15-year-old kid, seeing this guy at a show, talking to him, and he was being so cool. And I've told him this story several times where the interaction with him really inspired me to become a rapper. And same with Sean Price. Sean Price at that period, if you're familiar with, or I'm not sure if you're familiar with any of his trajectory or anything, but he was already like he was a big deal prior in a group called Helter Skelter, and
Hmm. Yeah.
then became a solo artist, and Vinny Paz from Jedi Mind Tricks, which is like incredible Philadelphia hip hop group, kind of took him and started bringing him on tour and just blew him up as a solo artist to a whole nother level. And that album to this day, I bought the album there. I still have the Jesus Price poster. But yeah, yeah, man, there is nothing. So hearing those songs, um, really is what inspired me to do what I'm doing now. And I'm very fortunate to have met all of them and have worked. I unfortunately never got to work with Sean Price before he passed away, but I've recorded Vinny Paz. I've recorded several members of Jedi Mind Tricks. I've recorded Reef the Lost Cause. So it's like I've gotten to work with these people. I've met Sean Price and gotten to be in a lot of those circles that he ran in. So it was super formative of where I am today. Just, yeah, man. If you're not familiar, I would check out that album just from like a lyric standpoint. Just some of the best writing and some of the best punch. If you're into hip hop and punchlines and how he puts words together is just it's pretty mind blowing because it feels lighthearted at times, and then there's just so many layers to it.
Yeah. What the hip hop community in Philadelphia, when you were kind of getting into that, what was their take on punk, or knowing that you came from a punk background, how did
Well,
that integrate into their place?
Vinny Paz, going back to him, he was always into that stuff. I would see Benny Paz at shows and just even in his music videos with a Trapped Under Ice shirt or different punk rock bands and hardcore band shirts. And a lot of like the rappers that I knew were doing music with bands. So Sean Price even there was a band called Cold World. They were a hardcore band, and they have an album where they they did features with all these other rappers. So you got Vinny Paz, or not Vinny Paz, Sean Price, Cool G Rap, different like legendary rappers that are doing songs like
Cool G
hardcore
Rap.
songs
Wow.
with them. Yeah, and it was awesome to that was very influential on me. And they're in Philly, especially, there was a lot of rappers that were doing stuff with bands. The music scenes are very interconnected. So, you would go to a punk rock show or a hardcore show and you would just see some dudes who just walked in off the street, especially if it was a house party. There'd just be like the neighbors there hanging out, drinking 40s with you, and just, and it would just be cool. So it kind of was an interconnected scene, and rappers, there was a lot of rap bands. That was really big in Philly for a minute there, where it'd be like, I guess if people were wanting to do the Rage Against the Machine thing, or, so that was happening a lot, and you'd see that at punk rock shows. I used to run a venue in my basement called the House of Gore, and I remember we had this band come called Agents of Change, and they were a punk rock rap band.
Okay.
Uh,
Wow.
they had a rapper that did all the vocals. I'm sure you can find their music still, and their music was very punk rock, fast, and just even later in life, getting to know people like Rich Quick. I'm not sure if you've ever heard any of Tim Armstrong's solo stuff that he does from
Mm.
Rancid. He does a thing called Tim Armstrong and Friends, but he'll get rappers on there. My friend Rich was one of them. He'd put out an album, Tim Armstrong and Friends, and Rich Quick had a song on there. It was just super cool.
The seeing some of the like punk stuff where they're crossing over or with hip hop, it's interesting to me because you think about the early stuff. So like when the Clash came to New York and then they kind of went to Harlem and then they heard some hip hop and then they kind of put some hip hop on one of their songs, which was later Clash. Blondie doing a little bit of, talking about Fab Five Freddy.
Right.
It sounds like if you listen to it now, it sounds really a little bit corny compared to how far hip hop came. And it was almost like because they were a lot of the same people. And I think it sounds to me like what you're describing is that we went to different shows, but we were into skateboarding, we were into punk, we were into rap. And I think back then, maybe downtown in the Manhattan, there were all these people hanging out in this kind of like crowd going to shows, and hip hop kind of overlapped with what they were doing with Blondie and some of the punk stuff. So maybe that's kind of how they blended some of that together. I think it's
For
done a
sure.
lot better now, personally, just
Oh, I
when
agree.
I listen to some of the old stuff. But I feel like they attempted to, or that was like the bridge they were building back then.
No, I agree. I think it led to a lot of bands like I'm not sure if you ever heard this band Whole Wheat Bread. Um,
Uh-huh.
they are a punk rock band that has people like Little John come on songs,
Mhm.
and it's awesome. I saw Whole Wheat Bread on tour with Suicidal Tendencies and Madball when I was
Okay.
younger.
Yeah.
It was a crazy tour, and they might have had the best crowd reaction. It was
Yeah.
just like they're a great band, and I think they're putting out new stuff again. They've stopped for a long time, but yeah, I think exactly what you're saying is true, and I think a lot of that early New York nightlife stuff in the music scenes and in like cult classic movies. John Waters was doing a lot of movies where they would get like punk rockers and hip hoppers and all these people together and do these
Yeah.
cult classic movies, and then they would go and do cocaine together and stuff. So it kind of led this whole other world that I think that kind of linked a lot of people together, like crazy 80s and 70s movies. And uh, yeah, it's pretty cool. It is cool to think about the history, but it does sound a lot better now.
We get to track 6. This is Sage Francis, Slow Down Gandhi.
Did you listen to this one?
I did listen to it, but I hadn't heard it before. So,
Okay, so this is arguably the song that got me into hip hop,
okay.
just completely, and that's why I said it kind of went into it. But being a punk rock kid in late 90s, early 2000s, there wasn't the internet like that. We didn't have the internet when I was, I knew other people who had it, but um, I would order records off of catalogs. and I
Yeah,
would
me
get
too.
yeah. So I and you never heard some of these bands. The record cover would grab you. Especially like I'd get like the Epitaph catalog whenever you'd get an order in, and I'd just start ordering some stuff. And I remember seeing this record called it was Sage Francis, the record's A Healthy Distrust. And I'm looking at this record, and it's got like the wooden fence posts on and graffiti, and it just looks so cool. I'm like, I've never heard this band before, so let me check it out. Well, the records come. I forget what other records I ordered on that. It might have been like Dag Nasty or so,
Hmm.
something. But my records get in. I think I listened to the other records of the bands I was more familiar with first, and I would always take those records and record them to a cassette tape. My friend had, I don't know if you remember when it was cool, but they had those ghetto blasters, and we'd make cassette
Oh yeah.
tapes, and we'd had like a shopping cart we stole from somewhere, and we had that thing in the like seat part of the shopping cart, and we'd push this around, and we have just all these tapes. So everywhere we went was a tape.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
so I remember recording all the Dag Nasty stuff and maybe whatever Bad Religion record or whatever. There were so many good bands on Epitaph at that time. And then I go to put on the Sage Francis record, and I'm like, what is this? Like, and then Slow Down Gandhi comes on, and it is the most punk rock like lyrics ever. It was just super. It was punk rock lyrics with hip hop music on
Hmm.
there. And before, I was so into punk rock, like I couldn't listen to anything else. Like I was very closed off to the rest of music. And I even had like a sticker on my window. I think it said like rap is crap. And so like just a stupid sticker that I bought, but I didn't like dig into hip hop prior to that, like deeper than the surface of it. And literally, I'm listening to this record, and it just blew me away. When that song came on, um, it was every band I was listening to at the same time's lyrics just rapped. And I thought, like, vocally, the talent to do that was incredible.
Yeah.
It just was out of my wheelhouse at the time. So that was awesome. And then I just continued through the record, and there's just amazing songs on that album. Like, the whole album, just lyrically, was insane. And then there was other songs like, oh man, there were so many songs on there that are good, but I can't. I'm not gonna like rack my brain here, but immediately after that, I went to like I think FYE or Tower Records or whichever one was open at the time, and I still was buying cassettes, and they had "It's Dark and Hell is Hot" by DMX on cassette on sale for like a couple bucks. So that was my second hip hop album was "It's Dark and Hell is
Wow.
Hot," and I went from Sage Francis to that, and now my mind is open. Sage like unlocked the door, and now the floodgates are open, and I'm listening to It's Dark as Hell is Hot, and from a whole new light, and it just that blew me away, and that's where it led me to finding Jedi. I'm looking up local stuff. I'm like, all right, there, and of course there was at the time State Property, Beanie Siegel. There's that the DVD era stuff was really kicking off in Philly too. So a lot of those like street rappers and stuff, which I got into later, and we actually filmed some of that stuff once we opened the studio. But yeah, but then I find Jedi Mind Tricks, and I find this whole other like underground hip hop world of stuff like Cage and uh the Cool G Raps, and this whole world that I didn't know existed, Atmosphere and Aesop Rock and all this stuff. So immediately I bought tickets to that Jedi Mind Trick show. That's where I found Sean Price, which still Sean Price top five. That's where I found out about MF Doom. Huge MF Doom fan. Um, yeah, so that it just like that Sage Francis song. If I would have never heard it, I definitely probably wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now.
Wow. That's pretty cool. Um, your Tell me about your book. That's just this is called The Invasion of the Punk
Oh
Rockers
yes,
Who
I
Drink
happen
Blood.
to have one right here. I always have them on the desk. Yeah,
Where did
so
you get the cover from? So who did the cover?
my friend Greg did all my artwork. He was my tattoo artist. He did all my artwork for it. Incredible artist. In th every single chapter in the book, there is a little piece of art. And we did a thing where if you got those tattoos from the book. We made like tattoo flash. You could get a signed copy of the book. I have a couple of them myself, but they're kind of hard to see. But yeah,
Wow.
so
Okay.
Greg is amazing. He's also a fellow punk rocker. I met him when I was 15 and we just hit it off. I've seen so many shows with this man. He really is who got me into some of the more like uh country punk stuff too, like Lucero. I love Lucero. And I've seen them open for Social D and they're amazing. That was a big Greg was into them, and then bands like Lost Dog Street Band, and he also was really big into some of like the earlier skate punk stuff. So, shout out to Greg for getting me into that stuff. But yeah, the book I started working on when I was like 15 too. Uh, I'm not sure if you're
Okay.
familiar with Trauma. They did movies like The Toxic Avenger and
I remember Toxic Avenger. Yeah.
yeah, so they did a bunch of movies like that, super crass, just very like offensive, like B horror movies.
Yeah. Yeah.
And as a young punk rocker, they were from like Jersey, New York, that area. They were always in Philly. As a young punk rock kid from that side of town, it's like that was something that was really cool to me because all their movies have like punk rock soundtracks and it's very like anti conformity kind of movies. Class of Nukem High, everybody's got mohawks and stuff, and same with like Toxic Avenger and a lot of those movies, and they're bad movies. And
Yeah.
rewatching them as an adult, it's like, oh my goodness. But as a kid, it was very formative. So I met Lloyd Kaufman, and I asked him. I said, "Hey, what would it take?" I'm a teenager at this time. I'm like, "What would it take to get my script for you guys to do it as a movie?" He's like, "Well, what's your script called?" And I didn't even have a script. I'm like, Invasion of the Punk Rockers, Who Drink Blood, the musical. And he's like laughing. He's like, all right, well, if you really got a script, get in touch with me and we'll see what we can make happen. So now I'm like at home ferociously typing, trying to get this, script together. And it was really bad. I'm leaning on, you know, what I know of punk rock as a teenager. It's like my original concept was uh, if a vampire big one of my kids is coming into the room right now. What you doing there, buddy? I was like the original concept was if a if you were a punk rocker, you got bitten by a vampire, you turned into a corporate zombie. It was that like base level bad. So that I over the years I abandoned it, but I would come back to it a little bit and work on it. And then a couple years ago, I completely scrapped it, but I love the title. Obviously, I got rid of musical. They had put out a movie called they put a movie called Cannibal the Musical out, and it was like the South Park creators and their like project together. And it's a terrible movie, but that was in my mind when I'm thinking of like what to call this thing off the top of my head. So I got
Hmm.
rid of the musical, got rid of the whole bad concept, and I went back in and completely rewrote it as, it's a story of punk rock kids. They're dealing with all the real world monsters that we've all dealt with. They're dealing with bullying, they're dealing with your parents just not understanding and
Yeah.
small
Give me
town
a Pepsi.
exactly. Yeah, yeah. All I wanted was a Pepsi. And they are dealing with the racism and the homophobia and the sexism and a lot of the stuff that every kid in life is going through, and especially today. They're dealing with small town politics. They're dealing with the sheriffs and the cops and the teachers and all that, the jocks and the everything. So they find each other and they form their own little punk rock community, and they just, they're dealing with those real world monsters. They end up dealing with some otherworldly monsters as well. So it was a lot of fun to write, and everybody in the book is based off somebody I've encountered through punk rock, and it's very true to me. So it's a fun one.
And you're doing an audio version of it as well?
I'm working on the audio book right now. I have an actor from Philly, this guy Kevin, who's amazing. We're working on it, and then I'm actually going out to Chicago to Gravity Studio to talk to them about doing the audio drama. And then my Sony rep, how punk rock, right? My Sony rep is helping me try to pitch it to some streaming services too. So hopefully in the next couple years, I've already been told I have to have the sequel out before they'll touch it, but I'm working on that. But hopefully in the next couple years, we'll have a Netflix show about it.
Would you consider turning it into a comic?
Oh, for sure. I would love to do that. That that'd be probably one. I'm a huge, and you can't see all my bookshelf on me, but one whole floor to ceiling shelf is all comics.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm diehard comic nerd.
It just sounds like from what you're sharing and about the book that I could see there's an angle there where people who are into comics, and I know I wasn't really reading the Walking Dead, but following, that came from the
Right,
comic
right.
book and stuff, and thinking this kind of has it could have a genre that would be appealing to quite a lot of people.
I would make it a comic in a heartbeat. That would probably be one of my happiest moments in my life.
Yeah, we get to track 7.
Track
This
7.
is 3 6 Mafia. I've
Yeah.
heard of them. I got 2 out of the 10 on this, so this is half on a sack.
I part of me picked this up because it's such a ridiculous song, but also because I do have such a deep connection with it. This was me and my business partner Ethan. He was my first friend with a car. And we were both really into the same stuff. We were in a couple bands together. He was like a fill-in on Fruit Punch at the time and became a full member later. And then he was the guitarist and singer in a band called the Big Round Objects that I played drums in. So um, sometimes we'd have our bands tour together and we'd do all sorts of stuff together. But he was the first one I knew with a car, and we would go around and we'd burn CDs, and a lot of them would be punk rock and what we knew of hip hop. But we got super into 3 6 Mafia because the lyrics were just so outrageously ridiculous.
Yeah.
And this song in particular, we would go in some of the worst neighborhoods in the world and play this song dumping with the music, like the windows down. And I can't actually quote like any of the lyrics because it's just not appropriate for me to say them out loud, but great, like foundational moment, bonding with Ethan prior to the studio being open. And if you ask anybody, and himself included, when we first met, I hated Ethan. He would come to my band practices and we had a mutual friend, this girl Ashley. I was in another band called Papa Bear with, which was like a folk punk band, acoustic folk punk band, and her friends was his girlfriend and whatnot. So that Ethan would come over and hang out and just like sit on my steps while we'd have band practice, but he'd never talk. So I just like hated this kid. I'm like, why is this kid here? He's not talking. But the original drummer of his band, the Big Round Objects, became my drummer of Fruit Punch. I taught him how to play drums because I was playing drums in that band. We were originally a two-piece, and then I wanted to play guitar. And I had taught Jordan how to play drums, and then Jordan left their band. And then eventually me and Ethan just really hit it off, and it was over stuff like 3 6 Mafia, half on a sack. And then, from bonding over this, we started the studio, and that just really genuinely changed both of our lives.
And Ethan's still involved in the studio now.
Yeah, 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 yeah. We've been through this thing together, and we've been through a lot together as far as before the studio, just going on tour. After Fruit Punch broke up, me and him being in a couple other bands, like we were in a band called Extra Tongue that was on the cover of Maximum Rock and Roll. So we've done a lot together musically. He was my hype man when I first started rapping. We've tried to have so many bands together and just we learned how to engineer together. We didn't know what we were doing. Now I have a master's degree in music technology, and he's got a degree, and before, though, we did not go to school to start the studio.
No.
We opened it, and I remember our first session we started building in 2008. We opened 2009. The very first session we had, we're still putting foam up on the walls in the vocal booth. The
Hmm.
guy walks in. We've never recorded anything but ourselves before, and somehow it just clicked and worked. And some of that early stuff sounds bad, but we learned together and we really progressed through it and have become like respected engineers in the field. And we've done some pretty big projects, from mastering a song with Kendrick Lamar and J-Rock on it, to recording Beanie Siegel, to running a record label that's put out songs with Beanie Siegel on it, and Carol Riddick and all these other amazing artists. And uh, that all just came from me and this kid driving around listening to Half. which is also funny because neither of us did cocaine. You know,
Yeah.
and that's what the song is about. So it's just it made I think we just found the irony really funny.
We come to track 8.
All right.
This is an artist that you probably know really well. This is called Rolling Stone.
Yes. That is by me. This was one
Yes.
of my songs. This song means a lot to me because of where I was when I wrote it. Um, I had been in Houston. I was teaching I'd gone through a lot. The first time I got out of the army, um, I got medically discharged. I had Crohn's disease. So I got medically discharged. Then I went through a divorce, uh, packed up and moved to Seattle to do a thing called the Veteran Conservation Corps. That got shut down because of the weather. So from there, my mom had gotten in an accident. So I went out to Houston to help her because they said she wasn't going to walk again. And then she walks fine now. But uh, I went out there to help her, and during that time, I went through Hurricane Harvey. I went through the big ice storm out there. Um, had a lot going on, but I during all that, I found this place called Workshop Houston, and that's where my love for teaching really came from. Is like, working there, working with those kids. But I was away from Philly, and you know, a guy, Rich Quick, what he's the reason our studio took off. We started this thing called the Marsten House Cyphers, and Rich did the very first one. He did the first like three of them. And his cosign, he was already popping in Philly, and his cosign made everybody know that it was cool to come do our thing. And because of that, now we're 800 videos in on YouTube. We have millions of views. We've had some of the biggest rappers in underground hip hop, Terminology, Diabolic, Whitney Payton, like just huge underground rappers. And that's all because of Rich. But while I was in Texas, one of our mutual friends passed away, and Rich, it really like broke him in a lot of ways. And not too long after that, he passed away too. Um,
Uh,
I, without any kind of plan, quit my job teaching. I've been there a couple years, moved home, had nowhere to live. I crashed with my brother. I stayed in homeless shelters. I stayed on anybody's couch who'd take me. I slept in the car. Uh, and during that time, I felt like I owed it to Rich to take my own music very seriously again. So I am going, 100 miles an hour on um, going to shows, performing, being in the studio till 4 a.m., sleeping for 2 hours in the car, getting back in the studio, doing sessions all day, going to shows to shake hands, maybe doing a minute to do a song. And in this time of just pure chaos, I start having a crazy mental breakdown. I would go to Rich's mom's house, and we have another guy named Mikey Eyes, who's like a good friend of ours. And me, Rich's mom, and Mikey are hanging out, and we're a mutual friend of ours was going through some horrible stuff, and we're watching The Sopranos, and we're just eating dinner. And Rich's mom goes, well, we're talking about him. She's like, well, they're Italian, right? And then Tony Soprano goes, we're Italian, right? Like it was like boom, boom. And something about that just cracked something in my brain. Like I felt like the room was long, and I just start sweating. I'm like, I'll be back. I go to the bathroom. I'm splashing water on my face. And like, I just had like this lapse in reality. I felt like nothing was real. And, then I got over it, dropped Mikey off, went to the studio, met our other friend, Nick. He's one of my engineers. And I'm like, Nick, just let's make this song. And I had him recording, and I just start playing the bass line, the do 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 do. I'm just, and it just sounded awesome. It was a one take, and then bust out the drum machine, and I do the drum track, and go in the booth, and I start spraying an aerosol can, and I actually peed in a cup and recorded that, and like all this crazy like weird stuff. A lot of people don't know that that noise in the very beginning is me peeing in a cup. And then, I lay a guitar track down, and it just sounded awesome. It sounded like nothing I've ever done before. It was very much like a pop record, like it has a dance feel to it. And then I'm like, yeah, just record it. And then I just freestyled the whole first verse. We like one taked it. Had it was not written. It was just what it was. And Nick was like, "This is amazing. Like, what is this?" I was like, "I don't know." And then I sat and actually wrote the second verse, which a lot of people think the first verse is better. So like, maybe I should have just, I kind of lost the will to freestyle, but it was just after I had just went completely off the rails. And now here I am, like making this song. And that song, I think is, while it's very different than anything else I've ever done, I think it's one of my best songs. It has so much deep meaning for me from what was going on. And it was just in that movie, The Realtor, with Jake the Snake and a bunch of wrestlers. Um, and yeah, it has such a deep meaning of like where, and this was a few years ago now. So this was
So
2018 when
15
that was 2018 when that song when
was in the
that
film.
the film just came out. The Realtor just came out. It was either earlier this year, I want to say. Yeah, I think it was this year or late last year. Um but yeah, so that song has such a deep meaning, and I mean it goes into the next song, so I won't like keep going too much, but
Which is track 9, Rich Quick,
right.
Everywhere
The,
Man.
the Everywhere Man. And Rich, if you look this guy up, one of the most incredible MCs, one of the most incredible entertainers I've ever met in my life. Uh, Meeting him, when we first started, like not a lot of people knew who we were. It was me and Ethan, just two kids coming up in the scene. A really good friend of ours was Big Philly. He ran the Street Arena Battle League. Rest in peace, Big Philly. That was my brother right there. And Big Philly co-signing us got us in a lot of doors where I'm judging rap. I had no business judging all these rap battles with people like Joey Jihad and Tech Nine, and I'm just sitting on this panel and like my opinion is important. And we'd give out like studio prize money for these battles and stuff. And that's how we started meeting a lot of the people that I'm just still really close with to this day. And Rich was one of those guys where we met a guy named Trey Digga and a guy named Mike Voss. And that they were mutual friends who ran in circles with Rich. And I just invited Rich over to a studio session. He came in with his manager, Chelly, and jumped on a song and blew me away so much I didn't want to be on the song. I was just like, oh my God, this dude is so incredible. And I'd never had that feeling before. I thought I had been like doing music with just awesome people, but Rich just had a different level of charisma um, that not a lot of people could match. And again, him co-signing the Marsten House Cyphers is why anybody knows what Marsten House is. I will never not give him credit for that. He's
Uh-huh.
um, coming up with him, and he was the song "The Everywhere Man." I love that song because he would tour London. He would do any show. And he would do any feature. He did not care who you were, how talented you were. If you were cool, like Rich would do a song with you. We've recorded some of the biggest songs we ever did was recording Rich's verse for features like the Tim no, we didn't actually record the Tim Armstrong song. What was the one? We've done a bunch. I can't even think right now, but we've done so many songs with Rich that were like huge features. And because of him, that's actually how we got the Kendrick Lamar song. Because
Uh-huh.
DJ No Frills, they had an album together called I'm with the DJ, and DJ No Frills was the DJ on the Kendrick Lamar song. So, and Mike Trampy was another friend of Rich's, and he was running the website Hip Hop DX. And that was a Hip Hop DX exclusive song. That was like one of the first like major songs we did early on. And a lot of that is because of Rich. And, he truly was the everywhere man. That song's not just a song. This dude would pop up. You'd hear a song, and then Rich was on the song.
Yeah.
Losing him was one of like the hardest things I've ever been through. It's even hard for me to talk about. I feel like I'm welling up a little bit right now, but it's been a few years, and I still sometimes I feel like it's just like a crushing weight of him not being around. I mean, I lost the motivation to really do the ciphers. We came back with him a few years ago. And it never was as popular as it was when we in our heyday when Rich was around, and just the scene kind of fell apart. We were in a group together called Corfu, and Rich was the glue. He was the glue of the whole Philadelphia scene, even though he's from South Jersey. But yeah, I mean that's why I picked that song. I mean, we wouldn't be talking if it wasn't for Rich. I would say that.
Yeah.
Right.
We get to your last track. This is it Zuzu?
Shoo Shoo.
Shoo Shoo. I love the Valley O.
Did you listen to this one?
Yeah.
This one, this I picked this song for a couple reasons because it has a story throughout, like a pretty continuous story. They were a band I found early in the punk rock scene. They were like an art avant-garde kind of art band. Incredible live. They'd perform with punk rock bands. They were in that like vein of punk rock, but more like maybe the Pansy Division kind of like era or stuff. So but they would be at like punk rock shows and they were just amazing. Like, um, I remember taking a friend of mine who was in a wheelchair to go see them, and we really bonded over this band. Still to this day,
Mhm.
like we still this was I started seeing them when I'm like 12 years old. So now tying it back in now with Rich, the first song he came to do at our studio was called Dream Chasers. And that song was a Shoo Shoo sample. So
Okay.
we didn't put it out. It was actually we sampled that song. Um, we never put it out because I knew I could never clear this sample. Well, when Rich died, I reached out to Shoo Shoo's singer, Jamie, and I told him the story, and he said he would be honored for us to release the song. So if you
Wow.
look,
That's
if
cool.
you, it was so cool. I never thought in a million years, I wrote this whole story. I mean, it was very true, and I kind of just poured my guts out to him. And he was just like, I'd be honored for you to put that song. I don't even want anything from it. Just put it out. He gave me full permission to do it. I got the licensing to do it and everything, and we released the song. I gave him writing credit on the song. So if you ever look up the Rich Quick, Steve Sxaks, Dream Chasers, he is credited on there as the writer. But
Mhm.
I just thought that that was such a cool full circle moment for me and for Rich, who also Rich was, he liked a lot of punk rock stuff too. He was Butthole Surfers fan. He was into Tim Armstrong, and we incorporated a lot of that stuff in his music. Like Ethan would make, a couple different songs with him that were Butthole Surfer samples, or so for him, the first song that we did together to be a Shoo Shoo song, this band that I've been listening to since I was a young preteen, uh, and for them to be so cool about letting us use it, and now it's out there for the world, just it made me just have so much infinite respect for them as a band. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I'll have to send it to you because it's a really cool song to listen to with the original. And we just took the guitar part, looped it. We just sampled the guitar part, looped it, and added some drums and some other stuff to it. So it wasn't even like the most creative sample. It's like a very obviously their song. But uh, yeah, I mean, I think we recorded that in 2012. And 2011, actually it might have been 2011. We recorded that in 2011 and the song came out in 2021 finally after Rich
After,
passed.
yeah.
Yeah, so that was that.
Steve, are there any artists, whether punk or hip hop, that you would like? It could be anybody. That you would love to work with, or that if there's a chance you could do something with.
Oh, I mean, well, the there's the person that I would love to work with. There's two people that I would love to work with. From the punk rock side, my biggest prime musical inspiration ever is Nick Cave. I'm a huge Nick Cave fan from the early Boys Next Door stuff to the birthday party to the Bad
Yeah.
Seeds to Grinder Man. I love Nick Cave. I love it. He's also inspiration for me to write the books. I love The Death of Bunny Monroe. I've actually seen Nick Cave. I was on tour in London and Nick Cave was performing at doing a book reading for the Death of Marilyn Monroe. I think I paid like $400 to go see it, and PJ Harvey happened to be in the show, and she came down and they did Henry Lee, or was it Harvey Lee, or which song they do
Henry
together?
Lee.
Henry Lee, yeah, they did Henry Lee, and that was amazing. Like somebody was like, if PJ Harvey was here, would you do that? And he was like, if she was here, and she's like, she's right there, and they literally brought her down and just impromptu did it. It was amazing. And
Wow.
then he read the book, and so the Nick Cave. If I ever had the chance to work with Nick Cave in any capacity, I'd feel like I pretty much accomplished all musical dreams. And then from the hip hop side of things, I would love to work with Black Thought. Um, I'm a I think Black Thought's one of the greatest lyricists ever. He's from Philadelphia. I know a lot of people who know him. We worked with an artist called Jazz Fresh that was kind of his mentor. So it's not even
Mhm.
out of the realm of possibilities that something could happen together, but I would love to work with him. Just that would be like a big bucket list item for me right there.
Um, it's great for you to share this with us. I appreciate it. And a lot of the bands that you name, especially bands that I know, some of them definitely from the punk side for sure, more than the hip hop. Um, and just bringing back some of these and just kind of like how you experienced, and then from maybe slightly different to my experience, but it's been incredible just kind of going through your music journey here and the 10 songs that you shared with. So I appreciate that.
I appreciate you having me on. This was really cool. I think I like found out more about myself kind of diving through this.
Steve, what's the best way for people to get in touch with you?
I mean, I honestly, if you want to hit me up on social media, it's just at Steve Sxaks on everything, which is SXAKS. That's a really, I respond to people on there. You can go to my website, letsgoguy.com or stevesgags.com and message me on there too. I will email you back. If you want to buy some merch, it's stevesgagsstore.com. Or I am probably one of the most Googleable guys you could ever find. So feel free to Google Steve Sxaks, and I'm sure you can find my all my contacts on there as well.
Your books also on other platforms, or is it just through your website?
Yeah, you can get it on my website. I've been kind of pushing people to go to Amazon to help me beat the algorithm. I know I make less money, but it is cheaper for you to get it on Amazon. I have to charge you an extra $5 for shipping, but if you get it on Amazon, it does help me beat that algorithm. I made a bunch of top 10 lists on Amazon, like young adult monsters and young adult, thrillers and different lists. So I'm trying to continue to get it in front of more people. And, I've been having a lot of kids come and tell me like the book has gotten them into punk rock. And that's kind of my mission. It's like if I can get a whole generation of kids into punk rock by reading a 400-page book, I'm happy. So if you want to get a copy of it, grab it on Amazon. Uh, save yourself a couple bucks and help me get it in front of more people.
Well, definitely, I encourage everyone to go there and to do that. And you're going to be working on your second book. You already got this
I,
sequel
I'm
coming out.
I'm deep into it. It's not going to take me 20 years to do the sequel. I kind of have a timeline of several sequels, so I am building like a whole universe with this. So, if you get this one, you like it, definitely like subscribe to my newsletter, anything on my website, and just be ready for that sequel to come out. Because there's right now I got like 12 of them planned out. I got a lot going on in my head, ready to. I can only pour it onto the page so fast though.
Yeah. Steve, to everybody, I say as we say goodbye to be kind, be humble, be loved. And I wish you the best. It's really been a pleasure to sit with you, talk to you, and have, especially from the punk side, because it's, again, like I said, it's so much an inspiration for me. And so I've really enjoyed having you as a guest, but
Awesome.
also just to meet you. And I wish you the best.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. It was a great time.
Thank you.
Pretty vacant times.
suffers for his sports jacket.